we sort of describe it a bit as you feel calm, but you feel energized at the same time. So it's that combination of the two. I think when people try Qigong for the first time, they're quite surprised because it's quite an unusual and very uplifting kind of feeling that you get from it. So for example, somebody starting out, I might teach them something like the 12 rivers practice, so working on those 12 organ meridians, those meridians of energy that we were talking about, and that's very much about clearing any stagnation in those rivers. So imagine your river is free flowing and you feel all vibrant and full of energy and everything, but you can also have a river that's full of sticks and stones and it's all kind of stagnant water, and they call it like stagnant qi, and so the water can't flow around those kind of blockages, if you like, and so these practices are all about stretching the meridian and sort of massaging the internal organs themselves as well to get everything flowing freely.
As you'll probably know by now, I believe that movement is a really important thing in all our lives, for a whole variety of reasons. I may coach natural movement, but I do this to help you keep strong movement foundations, to live better lives, and something I always emphasise is the goal for you to move well in daily life, to keep doing all the things you love for life. On top of my natural movement practice, I enjoy a whole variety of physical activities and love trying new things. One of these came onto my radar during the pandemic. You've probably heard of Qigong, but do you know what it is and how you do it? Having known Annabel Deans virtually for a while now, I wanted to pick her brains about what it is, how we could all benefit from knowing more about this ancient practice that has so much fascinating philosophy behind the movement, and why she feels it can be so powerful for people's lives. What does the word Qigong mean, and what is it?
Right, so Qigong comes from the Chinese, and roughly translated, Qi means our energy, and Gong means practice. So it's an energy practice, and what is it? So basically, some people might describe it as like a mindful movement practice, or a dynamic meditation. So we're doing movements that obviously help loosen the joints and the fascia and things like that, and help with our balance and our flexibility. But we're also working with our breath, which is really, really important aspect of it, and our minds as well. So there's the mind, body, breath connection. So that's what it is. It's not that well known at the moment.
No.
It's starting to gain a little bit of kind of popularity, and people are starting to see it and know what it is a little bit more.
But it's been around for a very long time, perhaps not in the West.
That's right, yeah. So it probably dates from about 5,000 to 8,000 years ago. So it is a really, really old. They sort of found scriptures and drawings and things of moves, and it was basically different families would have different lineages of Qigong. So if you Googled like Qigong on YouTube, for example, you might see lots of different types of practices, and they'll come down from different families, because there's quite a lot of secrecy sort of surrounding it all for many, many years, up until fairly recently, actually, which is why it wasn't very well known in the West. What I like about it, it's got lots of different aspects to it. So basically, you've got the healing modality is the sort of main kind of thing. So I can talk a little bit about Chinese medicine. I'm not a Chinese medicine doctor, but so it's working with the meridians in the body. So they're like kind of energy pathways. So if you've ever been for an acupuncture session or heard about acupuncture, they're obviously sticking kind of needles into the various points in the body. We aren't dealing with each individual point, but we're working with the actual meridians, so these rivers of energy that are going through the body, and we're working also with our internal organs. So I always like to think of it as kind of, instead of exercise, which is very sort of outward focused, it's inner size. So we're sort of focusing on what's going on internally. And then the second aspect of it is kind of like, it has a kind of martial arts kind of background to it as well in some cases. So for example, my Qigong master also practiced Kung Fu, and that's really amazing because when we work with our energy, basically, if you were facing an opponent in a fight or a battle or whatever, to be able to understand how their energy is working is really beneficial. It kind of gives you a bit of an advantage over them, and also being able to direct your own energy is also a really powerful thing. So being able to know that you could stay calm in that situation and direct your energy exactly how you want it to. And obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're battling, if you're in a kind of a fight or combat with somebody, you need to be able to, kind of really be strong. So basically, because they were fighting, it's a very physical thing. If you've got your Qigong practice as well, it meant that they were kind of, physically and emotionally very, very strong. So there's that side of it. And then
That's sort of the mental side as well, then,
well,
isn't it?
exactly,
Yeah.
that's it, exactly. And then the third thing is the kind of spiritual side of it. So I don't necessarily mean religious, but it's based on kind of Taoism, so the philosophy of Taoism. It's a really lovely, this is why Qigong is such a lovely thing to practice outside, because it's all about our connection with the outside world, so our connection with nature. So when we think about our DNA, it's kind of our DNA is like spinning inside us, these little helixes, and effectively, if we think about what they are, they're energy at the end of the day. So our whole body is made up of energy, and then the outside world is also made up of energy, like the galaxies, the universe, everything around us in nature. And so it's this microcosm of what's going on internally being reflected, or vice versa, with the macrocosm of the universe. And so it's this idea of really being connected with nature, and all the energy inside of us is the same as the energy all around us. So
I like that. Yeah.
it's a really nice concept, and it's kind of, in our modern sort of world, we kind of have lost some sort of contact with that a little bit. We're quite externally focused, but we're maybe not, focusing so much on kind of that connection with nature, the seasons, the cyclical kind of like, passage of time. And we're very sort of, we focus quite a lot on that in Qigong.
Oh, it's a really broad thing then, isn't it? It's far from just a way of moving. It's a real way of thinking and being.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's absolutely amazing. And so you talked about it, the families having their own specific ways of doing it. So is that almost, and you talked about Chinese medicine, is it almost like they had their own sort of recipe
That's right.
that worked for them?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. So, I mean, I practice, I learned a lot of my Qigong through my Qigong master, Long White Cloud Qigong in New Zealand. And his lineage was the Wa family. And so those practices will be passed down generation to generation. But I've also worked with other Qigong masters, and some of those practices might be 800 years old, practiced by the royal families and things like that. So they all have their kind of like background and tradition, but they also, there could be more modern sort of interpretations of Qigong as well, where we take the principles of Chinese medicine and then they apply them to the practice. So it's an ever evolving thing. It's not only sort of in the past, but it's always evolving, which I love.
And it's now being shared around the world. So that's, you being embodying that. So
yes, we've all got chi.
Everyone's got chi. And in physics, you can never create or destroy energy, can't you? So it's actually quite sort of almost scientific as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
And you just as you were talking there, I was thinking as well, when you were talking about combat, but I was thinking, when someone comes into a room, you can, people talk about feeling their energy.
Exactly.
If someone, before they've even not even necessarily showing it in their face or whatever, but you can feel sometimes when someone has low energy or high energy and that sort of bright form. So
exactly.
we all talk about it in a way anyway.
We do. We just all the time. So it's nothing mysterious, because I think people can think, is it Qigong? Is there a mysterious element to it? But actually, we do think about what our internal energy is doing all the time, really. And as you say, you can get affected by other people's energy. You could, a friend could be having a really bad day and be very, very stressed, and you kind of take on board a bit of that kind of energy and sort of come away feeling a little bit, a little bit sort of maybe stressed out yourself, and Qigong helps you because there's like to create kind of boundaries with that sort of thing. So you can use it in your everyday life so that you can feel perhaps less affected by other people's energy and more contained in your own energy, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Sounds very appealing. Yeah, absolutely. And so it can also be used as a tool then if you are feeling lower energy, let's say, rather than just sitting down and sort of hoping the recharge happens. Presumably you can access different ways, parts of Qigong, to help you to get I don't know what the word is, but access more of your own energy
Yeah,
systems,
that's right.
so that you can bring yourself back up.
Yeah, it's all about kind of developing that kind of life force energy so that you feel vibrant. We sort of describe it a bit as you feel calm, but you feel energized at the same time. So it's that kind of combination of the two, which is quite an unusual feeling, and I think when people try Qigong for the first time, they're sort of quite surprised, because it's quite an unusual and very uplifting kind of feeling that you get from it, because you've got that combination of the calm yet energized. And we'll teach different sorts of practices, like ones that kind of build energy internally. So there are different types of practices. So, for example, somebody starting out, I might teach them something like the 12 rivers practice. So working on those 12 organ meridians, those meridians of energy that we were talking about. And that's very much about clearing any stagnation in those rivers. So imagine your river is free flowing and you feel all vibrant and full of energy and everything, but you can also have a river that's full of sticks and stones and it's all kind of stagnant water, and they call it like stagnant chi. And so the water can't flow around those kind of blockages, if you like. And so these practices are all about stretching the meridian and sort of massaging the internal organs themselves as well to get everything flowing freely. So that's like you look at it like your kind of current account of energy, the energy that you're kind of using on an everyday basis. But you can also work on your like savings account of energy, if you like, the one, and that's kind of centered in we talk a lot about our dantian, so our center of our body, sort of around where the gut is, and this is like the translation of the dantian is the sea of chi. So it's like this area where all of your energy is kind of stored in your body. And we can work on practices that really help to build like a really solid base of energy, if that makes sense, in our center, so that when we need it, when we are depleted or whatever, we can kind of call on those reserves of energy, our kind of savings account of energy, if you like. So we do practices like that as well. So.
And you're putting your hands very centrally and low. Is that part the area of the body that you?
Yes. So so I'm basically placing it sort of a couple of inches just below my belly button. Is our dantian. There are 3 dantians. This is the lower dantian. So the lower dantian is very key. You'll hear that talked about a lot in Qigong. But there are also your middle dantian. So the lower dantian is more to do with your physical body, the middle dantian, your emotional body, and then we've got our upper dantian, which is the mind. We spend a lot of time in our lives, often up in our minds in our upper dantian, and so we kind of often want to just send our energy down into the physical body a bit more, because the physical body is always in the present moment. So
yes.
Yeah, the mind
which
is all over the place. Yeah.
and people talk about centering themselves,
yes,
to bring themselves sort of back into the present, and that's quite interesting that that is sort of your center in a way that you're pointing to. I'm noticing all these parallels as you speak.
yes,
Qigong came first, clearly,
well,
and it's rippled out, but people didn't even know. So what are the benefits of doing this sort of energy work and movement work?
Well, there are many benefits, and people practice for many different reasons. But it obviously it has an effect on on your health. So you might be sleeping better, you might have less stress and anxiety, and we all know how, if we are less stressed, how that has a massive ripple effect on our health in general. Obviously physically as well, it will help with your flexibility, with your mobility, with your balance. So that there are with your blood pressure. I mean, there are exercises that will lower your blood pressure. I was teaching one class, and it was on Zoom, and afterwards, I think one of the husbands had joined in the background. It was a work-based one, and the husband had joined in as well, and he'd been off work with blood pressure issues, and he'd taken his, I didn't know this, but he'd taken his blood pressure before class. We'd gone through a routine, a Qigong routine, and he took it afterwards, and he said, oh, I can't believe it. It's just like my blood pressure's the lowest it's been in absolutely weeks. So he was really blown away by that. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, he must be a convert now for sure.
Well, yes,
And
hopefully,
he's probably,
you know, I think that was quite a kind of the most concrete kind of,
yes,
kind of, you know, sort of immediate reaction that I've ever sort of seen really for a practice.
and he probably went jumping back to his doctor and said, I've got the solution.
Yes. Why did I not know about this before? Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you as well is about, so a lot of people also have seen Tai Chi around them and maybe tried Tai Chi. What are the differences, the basic differences between the two? One of the questions I wanted to ask about that being, how much do you move your feet in Qigong? Because in Tai Chi, I see a lot of similar shapes to Qigong movements, but also, and this might be my complete naivety, there's a lot of movement forwards and backwards, sideways and so on with the feet in Tai Chi. Is that the same in Qigong?
There's a little bit of both. So obviously I don't want to offend anyone who's into Tai Chi, but the difference, they are similar sometimes when you look at them, as you say, and you know, you might be in a park in China or something, and you might see people practicing either Qigong or Tai Chi, and Tai Chi is a form of Qigong in a way, because you are working with your energy. So it's like if Qigong was the big round circle, then Tai Chi would be a part of that, you know, inside it, if you see what I mean. But it tends to be longer sequences in Tai Chi. Sometimes they are based on sort of martial arts moves. I'm not an expert on Tai Chi, but like, you know, they're defending moves and blocking and things like that, done very slowly, obviously, with a lot of mindfulness about position and things like that. And they could be very long sequences. So they could be 100 moves, you know, that they go through in sequence. So it can be a little bit more complicated perhaps to learn than Qigong. Qigong would be shorter.
That's what I wondered.
Yeah, so Qigong sequences maybe 12 moves or 18 moves. And obviously your awareness is a bit more on your energy, and that can be different for everybody, as opposed to being a little bit more sort of like prescriptive on exactly where the stance is. It's more about what you're feeling with that energy flow. I hope it makes sense, and I hope that hasn't offended anyone who's
it does
or practices Tai Chi, but
no, not at all. You've not denigrated it. It's just different. But that makes a lot more sense. So and I like that, because in my teaching, I always say, if you don't quite get this right, it really doesn't matter, because the point is always, let's just move. Let's try to enjoy moving. Let's try and feel good, feel the benefit. And rather than, I think there's so much time spent in life saying, am I doing this properly? Have I done enough reps of this thing? Or what is it that makes it, beneficial? And actually, the answer tends to be just moving, and from the Qigong perspective, flowing and allowing that internal message, allowing you to connect your center, to connect to how you're feeling. A lot of people are so sort of disconnected from how they feel at all, and even after they've moved, they can sort of vaguely sense that they feel generally better, but they're not quite sure why. So it sounds like it's great at helping you to kind of hone that feeling.
Yes, and and everybody feels their energy a little bit differently, and we work a lot on tuning into our internal organs. I mean, how often do you think about what your kidneys are doing, or what your lungs are doing, or unless you've got a cough or something like that, but we really tune into our liver. We'll sort of like, I'll be you come to a Qigong class and you will know where your liver is and where your gallbladder is, and where your kidneys are and everything by the time you've finished. So
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, it's so fascinating. Would you say then it's relatively easy to learn, or do you think it takes a while to learn? And do you need to um, sort of build up when you first start so that you can sort of follow along, keep going, kind of thing?
Um, I think it's fairly easy to learn. I mean, if you want to practice it on your own, obviously that will take some some practice. But in order to just come along to a general class, you could pick it up fairly quickly. Within a couple of sessions, you're probably feeling um, more of the flow. I mean, I think when people first start, obviously they're focusing on the physical side of it. Their focus it comes in different layers. So they might be focusing on where their arms are, where their legs are, are they turning the right way, and all of this sort of thing, and learning the moves. And then you get to a level deeper than that, a level below, where maybe you are sensing sort of how is your energy feeling, how is it flowing, some of the moves, because if you're working with, for example, a move for the heart, you're working with the heart meridian, so it's coming down from kind of round near your armpit, and it comes down to the inside of your little finger, and the move where you're stretching and pulling in is going to massage your heart, but you're also going to be feeling perhaps some energy, some tension, some sort of like where that meridian
Mm,
runs, and so it's just developing that awareness, and that can take a little bit of time, it could take years, or it could be something that you feel immediately. And different meridians, some are easier to feel than others, or it just depends on the person. And also you'll find that some moves, if you particularly, I remember when I was learning, I found the liver move quite difficult. And it might just be the move that you really need, the one that you might need is the
right.
one that you might find the hardest to kind of like get the hang of, so yeah.
And that's when a class is really good, because then you can't skirt around it. If you see what I mean. If you don't like it, you're going to be sure to cover the whole range, which is going to be nurturing you. I
Yeah.
wanted to I wanted to ask you about the sort of emotional side as well. You talked about spiritual, but often I've found in some of my coaching, particularly private coaching, certain movements sort of bring things up for people
Mm,
that they didn't expect.
mm,
They get potentially quite emotional. Does that sometimes happen?
yeah.
Because obviously, if someone's not as connected to themselves
Mm,
and gets into this, um, they may find that some of their blockages are emotional things that have, are part of their past potentially, that come up. Do you find that?
Yes, yeah, that definitely happens. I mean, you do get occasionally someone having a little cry, kind of at the end of class or
Mm.
whatever. Um, for example, if we're working with like the metal element, that has connections with the emotion of grief, and sometimes if you're doing things like
Right.
that, perhaps somebody, or sadness and things like that, it can bring up some tears. Um, but sometimes people are surprised by that. How can these moves affect me like this, but you just move through it, like we always talk about emotion, energy in motion, it's kind of that idea that we can feel every emotion. We should feel every emotion. What we don't want to be is stuck in an emotion for a period of time. So we can move through these emotions and process them, if you like, through,
Yeah.
I certainly found that when I first started practicing Qigong. Sometimes they call it like a healing crisis or whatever, it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen, but sometimes when it does, you
Well,
kind of feel better afterwards. Yeah, it's like,
and you know that brain body connection has come up time and time again on this podcast in episodes that you wouldn't expect,
mm,
because it's so utterly prevalent and so important for people to understand that actually sometimes when something's really a problem for you in life, often doing some movement work, using your body in a different way,
yes,
can really help to, as you say, process
mm,
something that's going on
mm,
and help move you through it. And I think that's why I'm drawn to what you do, because it's different to sort of yoga is seen as a real sort of purely about calm.
mm,
But what I love about Qigong, and from your description today, and from before, and seeing what you do, it's about that balance between, as you said, calm and energized.
mm,
And who wouldn't want that in life? None of
mm,
us want to sort of not have the energy to live and be vibrant and thrive. But at the same time, we don't want to feel stressed. And there's moments for everything. Everything's got to go up and down.
This is
And that's
it. Yeah.
great. That's the
Yeah.
journey. But to be able to have a tool that helps you to sort of bring yourself back in line and potentially process things is amazing.
I mean, what you just described is kind of the yin and the yang, really, isn't it? Because, like, you know, as you say, we do live in quite a yang world. You know, it's quite fast paced. You know, it's quite,
I didn't realize I was.
you were
That's quite
describing
funny.
it. So you've got the yin and the yang
So tell me,
symbol, which is
yes.
quite, you know, I think most people will probably know what that looks like. But the fishes, the white sort of fish with the black eye and the black with the white, and you know, so in within each of them, so within the yin, within the white is the dot of black. Within the black is that sort of little eyeball of white, and so there always has to be an element of each, because if we were always really yin, you know, and very relaxed and everything, we wouldn't be getting anything done at all. You have to have some sort of, you have to have some drive and some sort of energy, you know, about you. But it's about being in balance. It's not being too much of one or too much of the other. And yeah, I think that's very important.
You know what, I've never had it described that way, and I'm really pleased you did, because I now completely and utterly get it. So it's funny. See, this is part of the reason I do this podcast. I always learn something new, where often it's something like that where I think I should have known that, or why have I never questioned it? But you do, if you don't know, you don't know. So yeah, no, that's fantastic. So tell me, how did you get into Qigong in the first place?
Well, it was right at the start of the pandemic, actually, because to go back a sort of year or two before that, I'd always been interested in health, but I didn't know in what way I would, you know, go forward with that. And I do love cooking nutritious food and things like that. So I started to do I did a year-long health coaching qualification. And obviously it had a big sort of aspect of nutrition, but it also had a lot about the breath, and I was suddenly really taken with the power of the breath. And so when I graduated, it was I think January 2020 then, and obviously we pretty much catapulted straight into a pandemic, and I was like, well, I don't think I can start a business kind of under these sort of, you know, conditions. And so I started, and you know, I was feeling like everyone else was, like quite unsettled by all of the things that were going on around us. And so I started to do a mindfulness teacher training program. So I did that, and I used to have a co-coach. I would ring her every sort of week over the phone. We've never met in person, but like we were over the phone, and she was saying to me, I've been doing Qigong, like, and I was like, what's that? And I hadn't ever heard of it. And at the time there was a lady doing sort of free Instagram kind of like classes, and she was doing things like the healing sounds and tapping the body and all this kind of stuff, and some sort of simple Qigong moves as well. And I started to do that, and I was completely and utterly taken with it. And I was like, why did I not know about this before? This makes me feel so good, and it's like a kind of the missing piece. You know, I practice yoga. I like yoga, you know, but for me, there was something about Qigong that just sort of was the missing piece of what I felt I needed at that time. And I sort of practiced it quite a lot for months and months on end. And then I said to my husband, I want to do this. I want to be an instructor. And he was like, rolled his eyeballs, because I absolutely love learning. So I never stopped learning.
I was going to say, another qualification.
Yes, rolled his eyeballs. But I was like, no, I really want to do this. I feel really passionate about it. And so I went on to do my first 200 hours of Qigong, which was very much the healing path. Some of those things like the 12 rivers and the sort of you know, the one about the 8 extraordinary meridians as well. So you have different types of meridians. It gets complicated. And then I went on to do another 200 hours, which was a bit more kind of yang practices. So more some very kind of strong Taoist breathing practices for really getting the metabolism going, and animal practices as well, which are more strenuous, because we often think about Qigong as being very gentle and, just quite sort of flowy kind of moves, but animal moves can be quite challenging, kind of, and quite sort of strong on our muscles and on our bodies and stuff. So, and also some iron shirt Qigong, which is another really interesting kind of, which kind of blew my mind when I first did it, which is all to do with kind of getting very strong and resilient, so that almost like our energy is all through our bodies, so it's not just in one place. It's just so we feel like an iron shirt would be, like a sort of protective kind of like strong layer. So yes, all sorts of different Qigong's got all sorts of different aspects to it. So it's kind of, yeah.
Goodness,
Yeah.
I mean, wow. So and so with each of these different types, how much of the actual movements in the classes cross over with each other? Are there still obvious similarities? I'm trying to visualize what you actually do in a class.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the animal ones, I'm thinking of down on the ground and all fours and so on. Is that
Sometimes.
completely right or wrong?
So a lot of Qigong is done standing, but there are some practices where, so we do a tiger practice. So tiger does involve some getting down on the floor, and that has more of a kind of planks, and you're kind of reaching out like a sort of cat reaching, like how cats kind of stretch out, and so that's there's all sorts of different aspects of it. What you would do if you came to a class is there would be some sort of a sort of breathing practice to start with, so really connecting into our breath. We would be sort of working with our dantian, so feeling the breath kind of expanding outwards on that inhale and coming back in, contracting back in on the exhale, and really connecting with it. And we also connect to other parts as well. So we have a chi belt. So the only horizontal meridian is our chi belt going around our middle. And so we would breathe into the sides, obviously diaphragmatically moving outwards. And then we would we could do some kidney breathing as well. So placing our hands over our kidneys and then just feeling kind of the breath expanding out into the back of the body. And that's a very yin practice. So very sort of gentle and very calming. And then we might do things like purging and any stagnant energy, any turbid chi, anything that's kind of like you just want to get rid of it, like I've had a bad day or whatever. And so we would do some exercises where we're just purging that energy. So in breathing in through the nose and then just really exhaling out through the mouth. Most Qigong practices are done nasally, so breathing in and out through the nose. Occasionally, if we're trying to shift something or get rid of some sort of energy, we might do somewhere we're breathing out through the mouth, but they are not so many of those. And then we might get into some of those more sequences, so sort of like the 12 rivers or between heaven and earth, which is the one I was talking about with building our internal energy. And so each class can be different. So we might be doing some where we're doing a practice like iron shirt Qigong. You would do something where you would be moving really, really, really slowly. So you would do a sequence of moves, so I would teach the class what the sequence is, and then we do the moves, but we slow it right down. And how often do we spend time moving really, really slowly? And slow isn't easy. Slow is not. People think, oh,
No.
slow is hard.
Totally agreed. Slow is hard.
Hard. So people are really, and it kind of highlights where your tensions are in your body. So, when I first started doing it, I was like, oh, my shoulders, and it was obviously I was holding a lot of tension there, but, and you breathe really slowly. So you're moving these kind of micro movements as you're raising. So you might take a couple of minutes just to raise your arms up to shoulder height and then bring them back down again. And you're breathing all the time, lovely nasal breaths. And you start to just feel the body, or kind of feel those tissues being oxygenated because you're moving so slowly, and it can be quite hard. People are kind of surprised at that.
And I bet people sort of want to, even though they know it's a slow practice, they're still going to rush through it because they're it's such a rare thing to slow down that much, that because life is, as you say, it's such a fast pace that even having the ability to do that is probably really quite tough for some people. I can imagine who they are now. If you see what I mean, I know some people who they sort of can hear what you're saying to do, what you're cueing,
Yes.
and they're off, they're gone.
Oh, yes. So that's a challenge. It's a mental challenge in itself, like being able to slow down. And there are also practices where they're called Zhang, where you actually stay in a position, so like a horse stance. So it's like a squat, sort of where you're very vertically, sort of you've got as if you've got a string pulling you up from the top of your head, but your knees are soft and you're in this kind of gentle squat, and you stay like that for a period of time, and you breathe. And again, very challenging, kind of, or even standing in what we call wuji, which is where we're just standing again with the knees softly bent, arms a little bit away from the body, as if you had like little eggs underneath your armpits that you don't want to squash. And you stand there, sort of sinking almost into your stance, so comfortably sinking into the ground, and we breathe. And like, you might do that for 20 minutes, and that's really challenging. That can be, I mean, not in a class, because obviously that might get a little bit boring for the people attending the class. But if you were doing like a longer workshop or something like that, or my own personal practice, you could stand and breathe. And then you've got like your mind is all sorts of chatter obviously goes on in the mind when you're doing these kind of practices, but you try to focus on what's going on in the physical body. And these kind of practices when we're really still on the outside, but there's just so much going on the inside. You can probably detect your heart beating. You can feel kind of energy building in those stances. So very still on the outside, loads going on the inside, and it's really interesting to take time to sort of observe those kind of things.
And you talked right back at the beginning about how this can help you to not take on someone's slightly more negative energy. Is it the same in terms of how you then look at yourself and being able to take that control? And I mean control in a good way, not in a, control can be quite a negative thing, but is do you find that transfers into life where you feel that you have skills to cope, I suppose, with the variety of things that happen in life?
Yes, most definitely. I mean, it is a massive part of my own toolkit, is having my Qigong practice. And I think it does ripple out into everyday life. It's not just your hour spent in class or whatever. There are many different, you can really feel how you have become perhaps more resilient to stress and things like that, or have little coping tools, little mechanisms that you can use to help you feel more in control in that.
And noticing feeling blocked, if you've noticed that in class that something's not right, and then you might then notice, and I presume you would have some tools to do something about it if you can remember them.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes it might be just as simple as, we do things like we do shaking, we do tapping, and they can feel a little bit unusual, if you've never been to a Qigong class before, and, I'm sort of directing you to tap down the body following the lines of the meridians and stuff. So that can be very energizing. So, and again, the shaking, that's really good for our nervous system. You might notice pets or animals do that. If they're sort of coming out of a stressful situation, they just shake because it kind of like balances the nervous system a little bit. So if you're having like an afternoon slump, like 3 o'clock sort of afternoon slump, and you just get up and do a little. I know you're very into movement breaks and stuff like that, so just getting up, doing a little bit of a shake or a little bit of a tap on the body, can just shift your mood, your energy.
Absolutely, you can feel so much better, and especially when you've got something ahead of you that you need to not be feeling the way you're feeling. Those kind of movements, we sometimes do sort of rebounding movements in the class. And when I get people, I've done it recently in a conference, actually in a movement break in a conference, when you get people to stop all of a sudden and then feel what they're feeling, ultimately this is what they're feeling. They're feeling that energy still flowing through them, and most people in that example with rebounding do seem to be able to tune in and feel what's going on, feel that energy buzzing within them, and smile. So they make the connection that that's a great positive feeling, and you hope that they take it away as a tool, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of people come to your classes?
Men, women, it's a mix of ages, which is lovely. So I could have people in class from probably 40s is probably like in my actual, I've taught children as well, but like for my adult classes, maybe 40s to, I have a gentleman in my class who's 81, who he's actually a Tai Chi teacher himself, but he didn't start doing any of this until he was in his 60s. And he's kind of like one of those perfect adverts for why you should be doing this kind of thing. He does these little sort of squats, and like up and down every morning when he's putting his the kettle on for his cup of tea or whatever. And so it's a real mix of ages, and people come for different reasons as well. Some come because they want to move their bodies in a gentle kind of mindful way. Some because of stress reduction, or maybe they're going through menopausal symptoms or things like that, and they find that is a real help. So it's all sorts of different reasons that people come and practice.
And that in itself is a real benefit, because then you're mixing with different types of people, different ages. So there's huge sort of community social benefits from being in an environment that has, particularly different ages. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so interesting, and I love the fact that you talk about how important the connection with nature is as well. And so you do a lot of your practice outdoors, is that right?
No, because the English weather isn't always going to play ball with us.
You don't have to be honest.
I love doing practice outside, and yes, in the summer we do try to practice outside. It's harder in the winter because it's really hard to feel your energy flowing when it's really cold. So if you're really cold, then that's going to have an effect on how you feel internally. And also if it's really windy. It has tended to be quite windy this year. Like I've noticed a lot of wind. Again, that is a little bit difficult to feel. When there's a lot of wind up on the outside of you, sort of around you, it's kind of quite hard to feel what's going on internally. So we do a bit of we do outside when we can. And I do collaborations with Nordic walking people and things like that, where we do a lovely walk with our poles, and then we get to a place like, we did one in the Ashdown Forest, for example, and we would go outside and practice our Qigong, as part of the walk, and carry on walking. So it pairs very well with that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I wish I lived near it. That sounds amazing. I want to be there. My goodness. Oh, sounds absolutely fantastic. And you talked as well about Qigong walking. Is that what you meant, where you walk and then you do some Qigong?
So that was the Nordic type walking, but Qigong walking is a separate thing. Yes. That is a little bit like mindful walking. So mindfulness we'll also talk about kind of a walking practice. And it's very much about kind of coming into the present moment. With Qigong, Qigong walking is more of an emphasis on your energy internally. So you might start off just really feeling, so just raising the arms up to shoulder height and then down again, and just really feeling your breath coming up through the soles of your feet. So maybe you're barefoot, you could do your Qigong walking barefoot. We're not necessarily going a long way with our Qigong walking, although you can. Right. But it's not about the destination, it's more about kind of feeling that you're in
the journey.
More about the journey than the destination. And so you would start maybe just by feeling that breath rising up and down through the body, and then we want to just take steps very mindfully, and then placing the foot down and sort of working with our balance, so we can really slow it down, or you can speed it up as well, but you just want to have that feeling of energy rising and falling as you're walking. And I'm going to do my Qigong master is over from New Zealand, and we're doing a sort of more of a deep dive. So I'm getting a more deeper certification in that at the end of the month, because there are all sorts of different Qigong walking practices. So there's all different ways that you can tap into your energy when you're outside and walking. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, I can't wait to hear a bit more about that. And so what does your personal Qigong practice look like when outside of when you're teaching, if you see what I mean?
So I practice pretty much every day, and they can range from, it can range depending on what timings that I've got, from 20 minutes to an hour and a half or whatever. It just depends how I'm feeling, and I pick and choose depending on what I feel is best for me. I do love the 12 rivers, I have to say. That is one of my favorite practices, because it's like a 360 holistic practice. It covers all bases, if you like, because you're working with all of the 12 organ meridians, so you're covering every organ in the body, ones that maybe we haven't heard of so much in Western kind of medicine, like the triple warmer and the pericardium and things like that are more unusual ones, but all the others, like our heart, our kidneys, our lungs, our spleen, our stomach, we're working with all of these different things. So and that can be, again, you can do a practice that's quite quick. So sometimes I could do the 12 rivers within 10-15 minutes, or sometimes you can just really slow those movements down, so you can play with the speed of things. Sometimes I might do a Wuji practice, which is more about just clearing kind of stuck patterns of energy, and if I feel that I really need something like that, or I'll do an iron shirt practice, or an animals practice if I really want to feel that I'm really moving my body a lot, and I feel that I've got a lot of energy I want to kind of like just move through. So yeah, my practice looks different. Sometimes if I'm not feeling very well, I might do healing sounds. So I might sit and just make sounds where each of the organs has a sound which is associated with it, and it's a bit like the idea of if you went to a gong bath or something, and the sound obviously is external then, but it's vibrating, and it has an effect on our internal organs, on our cells. It's like that, but you make the sound yourself. So that's a really good practice if you're feeling a bit below par, or there are breathing practices if you're not feeling 100%. So you just listen to what your body is telling you that it needs, and then that's how I do my practice. So I practice all sorts of different things depending on what I feel like.
And tell me what those teenage boys think of it when you're doing your practice.
Well, sometimes, occasionally, they have been known to join in, but it's hard, isn't it, with the teenage boys? But I think some of it sort of rubs off in the kind of, like the chat and the, and the breathing stuff is definitely, they're aware of all of that.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's worthwhile. Even if they really don't sound like
they're listening. The same question, Wendy, but like, it's like...
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm sure all of the good messages that we give them are embodied in there. They're just going to come out a bit later.
That's right. Maybe. Yes.
Listen, Annabel, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I found out so much about Qigong, and I just wish you lived a bit nearer.
Yeah.
So that we can...
Likewise.
Yes. So if people wanted to practice with you, do you do any, you work locally where you're in Kent, are you? Is that right?
I'm in Kent, yeah. So mainly my practices are in person now. But I do like corporate things online. I just don't have a regular class online every week, but I certainly do teach over Zoom as well, for groups or corporates and things like that, and schools, and
Oh, well, maybe I'll be able to grab you into my membership at some point to do some classes, because that would be really good. All right, well, listen, thank you so much for spending the time. I've really enjoyed chatting.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.